Karen loses it after I buy a lake not in the HOA, so I built a dock and started charging them fees to use it. Yeah, you heard that right. She tried to control me, even outside her little HOA kingdom. But when she realized the lake wasn't under her rules, things went from petty to personal. And trust me, this time I wasn't backing down. I built a dock. I made it exclusive. And when the HOA wanted in, I hit them where it hurt, their wallets. So sit back, grab your popcorn, and make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because you're not going to believe how far this HOA Karen went to try and take control of something she didn't even own. Let's get into it.
You ever have one of those days where you just want peace and quiet, but drama follows you like a shadow? That was me. I had spent months searching for the perfect spot to retire early. Somewhere calm, somewhere quiet, somewhere far away from HOA presidents and their constant rule books about mailbox colors and lawn heights. And then I found it. A peaceful stretch of blue water tucked behind pine trees and rolling hills. Locals called it Willow Lake. It wasn't huge, maybe 40 acres across, but it was beautiful. Calm water, perfect sunsets, and not a single HOA sign in sight. When I found out it was privately owned and up for sale, I didn't hesitate. I signed the papers that same week. The realtor smiled and said, "You're officially the new owner of Willow Lake." I had no idea those words were about to start the biggest war this small town had ever seen. See, right next to the lake was a gated community called Willow Ridge Estates. It was a shiny new development with big houses, golf carts, and, of course, a homeowners association run by one woman who thought she was the law of the land. Her name was Karen Montgomery. She wore pearls to every meeting, drove a white Lexus, and thought every blade of grass should be cut to exactly 2 inches. Now, I didn't live in Willow Ridge. I lived next to it, on my own land by my own lake. But the thing about Karens, they don't need ownership to claim control. It started 2 days after I moved my RV near the water. I was setting up a fire pit when a golf cart rolled down the dirt path. It stopped right behind me, and a woman's voice said sharply, "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" I turned, and there she was. Perfect hair, clipboard in hand, sunglasses too big for her face. Enjoying the view?" I said, half laughing. She frowned. "You can't camp here. This is a community lake." I blinked. "A community lake? Pretty sure I just bought it." She tilted her head. "That's impossible. Willow Lake is part of Willow Ridge HOA. It's in our covenant." I shrugged. "Well, maybe your covenant forgot to read the county records because I own this entire lake now." That was the first time I saw the famous Karen twitch, the one where her mouth tightens like she just tasted vinegar. She pointed her clipboard like a weapon. "We'll see about that. The HOA doesn't take kindly to squatters." Then she sped off in her golf cart, dust flying behind her. I should have known she'd be back.
By the next morning, 3 HOA board members were standing at the edge of my lake, arms crossed like mall cops. They wanted to review my deed. I told them I'd be happy to show it, if they brought coffee and stopped treating me like a criminal. They didn't laugh. One of them, an older guy with suspenders, said, "We have a community agreement. The residents of Willow Ridge have used this lake for years. You can't just shut us out." I said, "I'm not shutting anyone out. I just bought it. That means it's private property. You want to fish? Ask first." Karen stepped forward, holding a folder full of papers. "We'll see how long that lasts once the county realizes this purchase is invalid." I smiled. "Good luck with that. I bought it directly from the original family. Bid in their name for 80 years. You folks just assumed it was yours because no one told you otherwise." She froze. That's the thing about Karens. They hate facts more than they hate unapproved mailbox paint. A week later, things escalated. First, they posted community rule signs all around the lake, on my trees. Then they sent out HOA newsletters calling me the trespasser. And when that didn't work, they filed a complaint saying my RV violated the community's visual harmony. That one made me laugh out loud. So I sent them a letter back. Dear HOA, I am not, nor have I ever been, a member of your association. The lake is my property. Please remove your signs and stop trespassing. Sincerely, the actual owner of Willow Lake. I thought that'd be the end of it. But if you've ever dealt with an HOA Karen, you know that the end of it just means the next round is starting. One evening, I was sitting by the dock, well, my half-built dock, when I noticed flashlights flickering on the far side of the lake. 3 figures were sneaking around pulling something from the water. I grabbed my phone, zoomed in, and sure enough, it was Karen and 2 HOA members yanking up my no trespassing buoys. That was it. I walked down to the shoreline, clicked on my flashlight, and shouted, "You know you're on private property, right?" Karen froze mid-splash. She tried to play it cool. "We're just doing lake maintenance. These floating signs are dangerous for swimmers." I crossed my arms. "There are no swimmers, Karen. It's midnight." She hesitated, realizing how ridiculous that sounded. Then she pointed her flashlight at me. "You can't gatekeep nature." I grinned. Funny, coming from someone who fines people for planting the wrong type of grass. She huffed, gathered her little HOA army, and stormed off. That's when I knew. I wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. I was dealing with a power trip. The next morning, I decided if they wanted to play games, I'd build the board. Literally. I called up a few buddies from my contracting days and said, "Hey, you guys, ever build a professional-grade dock before?" 3 days later, construction began. Karen lost her mind. She showed up every day, clipboard in hand, yelling about community zoning and aesthetic consistency. I ignored her. By the end of the week, my dock stood strong. Wide wooden planks, a covered seating area, and a boat slip. I even installed a small sign. Private dock. Access by permit only. The next morning, as the HOA residents gathered for their morning walks, they stopped and stared. Karen's voice carried across the water. "He's charging to use our lake!" And that's when I saw my opportunity. I leaned on the railing and shouted, "Yep, since y'all seem to love this lake so much, I'm setting up an access permit system. You want to fish, swim, or launch a boat? That'll be $50 a month per household." You could hear the collective gasp from across the shore. Karen's jaw dropped. "You can't do that." I shrugged. "Sure can. It's called private enterprise." That night, I started getting emails. Some residents were furious, but others were surprisingly supportive. Turns out half the community hated the HOA just as much as I did. They'd been fined for things like wrong flower colors or leaving trash cans out for 10 extra minutes. One guy named Tom emailed me saying, "If this means I can finally use the lake without HOA interference, I'll happily pay." That gave me an idea. If the HOA wanted to fight, I'd use their own members against them. I printed flyers and distributed them at the local diner, the grocery store, even slipped a few under the HOA meeting room door. They read, "Tired of HOA overreach? Join the Willow Lake Access Club. $50 a month. Fishing, boating, and peace from Karen guaranteed." By that weekend, 10 families had joined. Karen called it an illegal business operation. The county called it perfectly legitimate private land use. For once, I was the one laughing. But you know how bullies are. They don't quit when they lose, they double down. So when Karen realized her own HOA residents were paying me instead of her, she snapped. She called a special emergency board meeting. And even though I wasn't part of the HOA, she invited me, probably to gloat or try to intimidate me. I went, mostly for the entertainment value. The meeting was held in their fancy clubhouse. Rows of residents sat in folding chairs while Karen stood at the front, tapping her pearls against her collarbone like a metronome of fury. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a serious problem. A man has taken control of our community's most cherished feature, Willow Lake, and is extorting residents for access. The crowd murmured. I raised my hand. Extorting? I call it business. Also, your cherished feature was never yours to begin with. Karen glared. You're ruining the harmony of our community. I smiled. No, I'm giving it freedom. Then I pulled out a large framed document, the official county deed with my name printed bold and clear. Gasps filled the room. Karen turned red. And that's when I said the line that started it all. From now on, every time you step foot in that lotter, you'll be standing on my property. So, either respect it or start swimming in your pool. That was the moment Karen lost it. She slammed her clipboard, shouted something about legal action, and stormed out, leaving the whole HOA buzzing. But what I didn't know was that she was already planning something worse. She wasn't just angry. She was plotting revenge. And when I found out what she tried to pull next, it made the dock war look like child's play.
You ever notice how some people can't handle losing control, especially when that control was never theirs to begin with? Well, that was Karen Montgomery in a nutshell. After that HOA meeting explosion, she went completely off the rails. I figured she'd calm down when she saw the deed. I figured she'd realize she couldn't bully her way through county law. But that's not how Karens work. They don't stop when they're wrong, they just look for new people to drag into their tantrums. So, 2 mornings later, I'm out on my dock, enjoying coffee and the sound of geese, when I see flashing blue lights coming down the gravel road. A county sheriff cruiser rolls up slow and steady. And who steps out of her white Lexus right behind him? You guessed it, Karen herself, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on even though it's cloudy. She stands there like she's the one enforcing the law, and the sheriff just kind of sighs as he approaches me. He's an older guy, maybe mid-50s. Name tag said Sheriff Daniels. You could tell he's seen this kind of thing before. He goes, "Morning, sir. Mind telling me what's going on out here?" Before I could answer, Karen jumped in like a contestant on a game show. "This man has built an illegal dock and is charging residents to use community property." The sheriff looks at me like, here we go again. I take a sip of my coffee. "Morning, Sheriff. Appreciate you coming out. But she's wrong on both counts. The dock's permitted, and this lake isn't community property. It's mine." Karen laughs that fake, high-pitched laugh people do when they think they're smarter than everyone else. "Oh, please, everyone in Willow Ridge knows the lake belongs to the HOA. It's in our covenants." I pull a folder from my bag and hand the sheriff the same county deed I showed at the meeting. He reads it quietly. Then he looks up. Then back at her. "Ma'am, this deed looks pretty straightforward. Ownership's been transferred legally to Mr. Reynolds." Karen's face twists like she just swallowed a lemon. "Then there must be a mistake. The HOA manages this lake. It's always been that way." Sheriff Daniels closes the folder. "Well, that might be the way it used to work, but the records show it's private property now. Far as I'm concerned, there's no violation here." I tried not to smile, but I probably failed. Karen just stood there fuming, and then she crossed her arms and said, "Well then, we'll just take this to court." The sheriff tipped his hat to me and said quietly, "Don't worry about her, son. This isn't my first HOA rodeo." Then he left. Karen stood there another 30 seconds staring at the dock like she was trying to set it on fire with her mind. Then she spun around and stormed off. Her Lexus kicked up dust all the way back to the gated entrance. I thought maybe that was the end of it. I thought maybe now she'd get the message. But I should have known. When a Karen loses in person, she takes the fight online. That afternoon, my phone started buzzing non-stop. Emails, Facebook messages, even voicemails from strangers. Turns out Karen had posted in the local community page. She called me a predatory land baron, said I was charging families to use their beloved lake and destroying local nature with construction. She even posted an old photo of me from my contracting business with the caption, "Would you trust this man around your kids?"
Yeah, she went there. At first, I laughed, but then I saw how fast it spread. Half the comments were angry residents repeating her nonsense, but the other half started asking questions. Wait, if he owns it, doesn't that mean it was never the HOA's? I heard Karen lied about lake taxes last year. My cousin said the HOA fees went up again, but the roads are still cracked. I didn't even have to defend myself. The truth started unraveling all on its own. But still, I wasn't going to sit back and let her smear my name. So, I made my own post. Calm, polite, but firm. Hey everyone, I'm the new owner of Willow Lake. Bought it legally from the previous family who held the deed since 1943. It's not HOA property and never has been. The Access Club I started is voluntary, not mandatory. Any resident who wants to use the lake is welcome to join. Fees go toward upkeep, cleaning, and insurance. I'll even host a free open day this Saturday so everyone can see for themselves. Thanks, and have a good one. Within hours, my post exploded with reactions. The top comment was from an older guy named Paul Jenkins. He wrote, "Finally, someone's standing up to that HOA. I'm bringing burgers to the open day." That's when I realized Karen had accidentally given me the best marketing boost ever. Saturday came. The open day was a hit. Dozens of families showed up. Kids swimming, dogs running around, people grilling hot dogs. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was free. Except one person. Karen. She sat across the lake with her arms crossed in a lawn chair, glaring through binoculars like a spy on a mission. Every time someone laughed or splashed, she scribbled something in her notebook. At one point, a group of teenagers in kayaks waved at her and yelled, "Come join us, Miss Karen." She didn't even blink, just tightened her lips and wrote more notes. I should have been annoyed, but honestly, it was hilarious. A week later, I got an envelope in the mail. Certified, stamped, official. It was from the HOA's attorney. The letter claimed I was violating community easement rights. They demanded I remove my dock and stop charging for lake access immediately or they'd sue. I took the letter to my lawyer. She laughed for a full minute before speaking. These people really don't understand property law, do they? She flicked through the documents, then said, "You own not just the lake bed, but the riparian access rights too. That means every inch of shoreline except what's on their individual lots is yours. You could even restrict their dock use entirely if you wanted." That gave me an idea so wild, I almost felt bad. Almost. See, the HOA's main pride and joy was a small concrete ramp they'd built years ago. They loved hosting lake days every summer where residents launched canoes and paddle boats. But here's the thing. That boat ramp? It was technically on lake property. My property. And when I looked up the county water records, guess who held the official boat ramp usage license now that the lake changed hands? Me. So, the next morning, I posted another notice. "Attention, Willow Ridge residents. Due to new ownership, the Willow Lake boat ramp will now require a usage permit. $10 per launch or $75 annual pass. All fees go toward maintenance and liability insurance. Thank you for your cooperation." I stapled one copy right to the ramp signpost and sat back to watch the fireworks. By noon, 3 SUVs and 1 golf cart pulled up. Karen led the charge. You could see the steam coming out of her ears.
"You can't do this," she shouted. "This ramp is part of the HOA's recreational assets." I pointed to the survey map on my clipboard. Actually, this dotted line here means it's part of the lake's riparian zone, which is now my property. The HOA built this ramp illegally years ago. But don't worry, I'm letting you use it for a fee. She stomped her foot like a kid denied candy. "This is harassment." I smiled. "No, this is business. And technically, it's you who's been trespassing for years." She spun around to the group of residents behind her. "Well, we're not paying him a dime. This is our lake." A guy in the back raised his hand nervously. Actually, Karen, maybe we should just pay the fee. My kids want to fish, and last time you promised to fix the playground, but it's still full of weeds." Half the group started murmuring in agreement. That was the moment Karen realized she was losing her grip. Over the next month, more residents joined my access club. Some canceled their HOA memberships entirely. Turns out the HOA had been collecting lake maintenance fees for years, but not 1 cent ever went to the actual lake because they didn't even own it. I filed a quiet complaint with the county auditor. Within 2 weeks, an investigation opened to the HOA's financial practices. Karen tried everything to fight back. She held emergency meetings, sent angry newsletters, even claimed I was endangering wildlife by putting up picnic tables. But every time she tried to attack me, it backfired. The county officials came to inspect and ended up complimenting the dock's safety design. The fire department praised my cleanup of old debris around the shore. Local fishermen even petitioned to have the lake added to the regional recreation list with me as the official caretaker. Karen couldn't stand it. Her precious authority was crumbling. Then one evening, I saw her standing at the edge of the lake alone, just staring at the water. She didn't yell this time, didn't threaten, just stared. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered how she tried to ruin my reputation and how many people she had bullied before me. So I called out, "Nice evening, huh? Perfect time for a swim. But don't forget your access badge." She glared one last time and drove off without a word. That was the calm before the next storm. Because the HOA wasn't done yet. If Karen couldn't win through the sheriff or the internet, she'd try something worse. Something sneaky. And what she did next nearly cost me everything. She tried to get the lake condemned.
You'd think after losing the boat ramp, after getting called out by the sheriff, and after watching half her neighborhood join my access club, Karen would have given up. But that woman had persistence like a mosquito at a summer barbecue. Annoying and impossible to get rid of. For a couple of quiet weeks, things were actually peaceful. I was fixing up the dock, renting out kayaks, and planning a small cabin rental business. Families came by to fish or barbecue. Everyone was happy. Except, of course, one pearl-wearing tyrant. Then one morning, a White County truck pulled up while I was repairing one of the benches. 2 guys stepped out wearing orange vests and carrying clipboards. One of them shouted, "Sir, are you Mr. Reynolds?" I said, "Yeah." And they said, "We're here to conduct an environmental inspection on behalf of Willow County. We received a complaint about unpermitted construction and possible contamination of natural water sources." I knew exactly who was behind it before they even said another word. Karen. I wiped my hands on my jeans and said, "Well, gentlemen, you're welcome to take a look around. Everything's up to code and permitted through county water management." They nodded politely, but I could tell from their tone this wasn't a normal check. They were looking for something specific, something Karen probably told them to find. One of them pointed to a barrel near the dock. "What's in there, sir?" I said, "Fish feed. You can check if you want." He unscrewed the lid, sniffed it, and said, "Smells like feed to me." The other guy walked toward the lake edge and frowned. "You've got runoff trenches cut into the dirt here. When did you dig those?" I told him, "Last month after the big rain. They're erosion channels. Keeps the dock foundation dry."
He scribbled something on his form. Then the first inspector leaned in and said quietly, "Off the record, we got a call from a woman named Montgomery. Claims you've been dumping chemicals into the lake. Said she had photos of dead fish floating in the water." I nearly laughed. "Dead fish? Buddy, this lake's cleaner now than it's been in 30 years. She's just mad she can't boss me around." They both exchanged a look. Then one said, "Look, we have to file the report. But if everything checks out, you've got nothing to worry about." They walked the perimeter, took water samples, measured the dock posts, and an hour later, one of them smiled and said, "Everything's fine here, sir. We'll mark this complaint as unfounded." I thanked them and watched them drive away. But as soon as they left, I saw Karen on the far side of the lake, phone in hand, recording me. She must have been watching the whole time. I yelled, "Hey, Karen! They said it's all clean. Maybe next time you should test your gossip for contamination too." She stomped off without answering, but I knew she wouldn't stop there. A few days later, I got another letter. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was from the county zoning department. Apparently, another complaint had been filed, this time claiming my dock was built on HOA land and encroached onto community property. It was ridiculous. The survey map clearly showed otherwise, but Karen must have figured if she threw enough mud, something would stick. I called my lawyer again. She sighed. "She's escalating, but I have an idea. Let's hit her where she least expects it. Ownership boundaries." I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" She explained, "Most HOA developments buy their common areas from a parent land company before they file incorporation papers. If the HOA never completed that process, technically, their roads or parks might still belong to the original developer. You remember how your deed came from the old Willow family?" I nodded. "Well, what if I told you that same family might still own the land under part of Willow Ridge?"
That was a light bulb moment. If true, Karen wasn't just barking up the wrong tree, she was barking on someone else's property. So my lawyer did some digging. 2 weeks later, she called me, grinning through the phone. "You won't believe this. The original Willow family still holds title to Parcel 37. That's the land the HOA clubhouse sits on. They leased it to the HOA decades ago. Lease expired 5 years ago. The HOA never renewed it." I almost dropped my coffee. "So you're saying the HOA's precious clubhouse isn't even theirs anymore?" She said, "Exactly. Technically, the Willows could reclaim it anytime they want." That's when a wicked idea hit me. I knew one of the descendants of the Willow family, old man Hank Willow. He lived about 40 minutes out in the hills. Quiet guy, loved fishing. I'd met him when buying the lake. So I paid him a visit. He greeted me with a big smile and said, "Well, if it isn't the man who saved my granddad's lake, how's it treating you, son?" I told him everything, how the HOA kept harassing me, how Karen was trying to get my property condemned, and how his family still technically owned the clubhouse land. Hank's eyes twinkled. "Funny thing, I've been thinking of selling that old parcel anyway. You interested?" I grinned. "Oh, I'm more than interested, Hank. I think it's time the HOA got a little reminder about who actually owns what." We signed the paperwork that same week. I filed the deed transfer, quietly, no announcements, no noise. Then I waited. Sure enough, the next Friday morning, I saw another county truck pull up. Same inspectors as before. One of them looked sheepish. "Sorry, sir, got another complaint. This time about unsafe structures and potential sewage leaks from your dock." I sighed. "Let me guess. Montgomery? Again?" He nodded. "She's persistent, I'll give her that." They checked everything again, all clean. But halfway through the inspection, something strange happened. Karen herself arrived, wearing a bright pink blazer and carrying a folder thicker than a phone book. Behind her came 2 HOA board members filming on their phones. She marched right up and said, "Good, you're here, officers. This man is endangering the community and trespassing on association property. We demand this area be closed immediately pending investigation."
The inspector frowned. "Ma'am, this is private property. He's within his rights." She jabbed a finger toward the dock. "No, that section of shoreline belongs to the HOA. I have maps right here proving it." She handed her so-called documents. They looked official, but as soon as I saw them, I recognized what she'd done. She'd taken an old pre-sale map from when Willow Ridge was being built and conveniently erased the boundary markers that showed the lake wasn't included. The inspector looked confused. "These don't match the county files, ma'am." Karen snapped. "Maybe your files are outdated. I spoke directly to a county supervisor. They said the area's jurisdiction is unclear." I could tell the inspector was getting tired of her, so I stepped in calmly. "Well, since we're discussing ownership, maybe it's time I introduce someone who can clear it up." Then I waved to the old pickup truck, pulling down the road. Out stepped Hank Willow himself. Slow, steady, baseball cap on his head, a file folder under his arm. Karen frowned. "Who is this?" I smiled. "This is Mr. Hank Willow, original owner of Willow Ridge's development land, and the man who sold me the lake. He's also here today because, as of last week, he's the rightful owner of the land your clubhouse sits on." The inspector raised his eyebrows. Karen's face went pale. Hank stepped forward slowly. "Well, howdy, ma'am. Seems you folks never renewed your lease with my family, so technically that building and about 2 acres around it belonged to me again. Or, rather, belonged until I sold it to this fine young man right here." He pointed at me. The silence that followed was pure gold. You could have heard a fish jump 2 miles away. Karen stammered, That can't be. The HOA owns that property. We have records." Hank smiled kindly. "I'm sure you have papers, ma'am, just not the right ones. County still recognizes my family's deed. Been that way since 1952. The inspector nodded slowly. "Well, that certainly changes things. I think we'll mark this complaint as resolved." Karen looked like she was about to faint. Her 2 board members whispered something and quietly backed away. I leaned closer and said, "See, Karen, when you play ownership games, you better make sure you actually own something." She didn't respond, just turned around and walked off without saying another word. The inspector packed up and left, and Hank chuckled as he watched her go. "Well, son, I'd say that's the last of her, but somehow I doubt it." I laughed. "Yeah, she'll be back. They always come back." Over the next few weeks, rumors started flying across Willow Ridge. People whispered that the HOA might lose their clubhouse, that the board was in financial trouble, that Karen had spent thousands of dollars on legal letters that went nowhere. I didn't have to lift a finger. The truth was doing my work for me. One night, I was sitting on my porch watching the sunset when headlights rolled up. It was Tom, one of the residents, who joined my access club early on. He got out holding a cooler. "Brought some cold ones. Heard the HOA board's having a meltdown." We sat by the water talking. He told me Karen had called an urgent emergency HOA meeting, screaming about property theft and illegal acquisitions, but most of the members just rolled their eyes. Some even voted to suspend her as president pending investigation. Tom laughed. "She's losing it, man. Half the neighborhood wants to dissolve the HOA completely. You might actually free us all by accident." That made me smile. I didn't start this war, but if it ended up freeing an entire community from Karen's tyranny, I'd call that a win. A few days later, I drove past the HOA clubhouse just to check things out. There were signs on the door, "Closed until further notice." Apparently, their insurance had lapsed, their maintenance fund had disappeared, and Karen was nowhere to be found. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But that's when something weird happened. A moving truck was parked outside her house, and I saw her standing there arguing with a man in a suit. It was her husband. I'd seen him once or twice. He looked exhausted, like he'd had enough. Later that evening, Tom texted me, "Bro, Karen's resigned, packed up and left, said she's moving to her sister's in Florida. HOA's collapsing." I didn't believe it first, but the next day a notice was taped to the gate. Effective immediately, the Willow Ridge Homeowners Association has been dissolved pending financial audit. Future community management will be handled by county administration. Just like that, the HOA was gone. Years of overreach and control vanished overnight. And all it took was a lake they never owned. But that wasn't the true ending. Not yet. Because while Karen may have fled town, her mess was still all over the place. A week later, I got another letter, this one from a private attorney representing the Willow Ridge Restoration Group. Apparently, a few die-hard loyalists wanted to reform the HOA under new management, and they were offering to buy my lake. The offer was laughable, half its real value. I wrote back simply, "No thanks. The lake stays mine, but you're welcome to buy an access pass like everyone else." I thought that would shut them down for good, and mostly it did. Except for one thing. Rumor had it, Karen wasn't in Florida after all. Some folks said she'd been calling around trying to find loopholes to reclaim community assets. And sure enough, 2 months later, a fancy letter from a new law firm arrived addressed to Lake Operations Manager. It claimed the HOA's original charter still gave them residual recreational rights to hold community events on the lake shore. I almost laughed out loud reading it. She really couldn't let go. So I decided to handle it the same way I handled everything else, with receipts. I invited every Willow Ridge resident still around to a big Lake Freedom celebration. Music, barbecue, kayak races, free for all club members. Over 200 people showed up. Kids playing in the water, dogs running around, old couples dancing on the dock. When the sun sound down, I stepped up onto the deck and grabbed the mic. 2 years ago, this place was nothing but drama. A lake caught in a tug of war. Now look at it. Peace, freedom, community. All without the HOA breathing down your necks. Everyone cheered. People started chanting, "No more HOA! No more HOA!" And for a second, it really hit me. What started as me just trying to defend my land had turned into something bigger, something that gave an entire town a taste of independence. Then a familiar voice called out from the shadows near the trees. "You think this is over, Reynolds?" I turned, and there she was, Karen Montgomery. Hair shorter, glasses gone, but that same fire in her eyes. She stepped forward slow. "You may have won the lake, but you haven't seen the last of me." I smiled. "Karen, you can come back anytime. Just don't forget your access card."
The crowd laughed. She clenched her jaw and disappeared into the dark. As the fireworks lit up the water that night, I realized the war might never truly end. But I didn't mind anymore, because this time I wasn't fighting alone. The lake was mine, the people were free, and the queen of the HOA was dethroned for good. The morning the real storm hit wasn't the one from the clouds, it was from the HOA. I woke up to the sound of trucks, big ones, diesel engines rumbling at dawn. When I looked out my cabin window, what I saw made my blood boil. Karen had a full-blown construction crew lined up along the road leading to my lake. Dump trucks, backhoes, and about 15 men in hard hats, all looking confused while she waved around some paperwork like she was leading a parade. And she wasn't alone. She'd brought reinforcements, the full HOA board, cameras, and even a drone buzzing overhead. I stepped out onto my porch with a mug of coffee, still wearing my flannel shirt and boots. My dog Max was growling low, sensing the tension. I took a deep breath because I already knew, whatever Karen was planning, it wasn't going to end quietly. "Morning," I called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Can I help you folks?" Karen turned,
her sunglasses reflecting the sunrise, and plastered that fake sweet smile that always meant trouble. "Oh, good morning, Mr. Mason. We're just here to begin construction on the community dock project. You know, the one our members voted for." I sipped my coffee. "On my lake?" Her grin tightened. "It's not your lake. It's part of the community's shared view corridor. The HOA has jurisdiction over any shoreline structures visible from our properties." I nearly laughed out loud. "Karen, I bought this lake outright. It's not even on your HOA map." She waved her stack of papers. "We have amended bylaws." I walked down the path toward her, calm but firm. "You can't just amend nature into your HOA boundaries, Karen. That's not how property law works." One of the construction guys looked nervous. Ma'am," he said to Karen, "this ain't the site we were told about. GPS says this is private land." She glared at him. "It's community adjacent, which means it's ours. Now start unloading." Before they could move, I held up a hand. "You lay one plank on my property, and I'll have you all trespassing." Karen crossed her arms. "You can't stop community improvement projects." I smiled slowly. "Oh, I can, because I've got something you don't. The deed and video proof." That's when I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Everyone here is currently standing on private property owned by me, Mason Cole. This is being documented." Suddenly, the crew stopped dead. One of the workers even whispered, "You didn't say this was private land." Karen hissed, "Don't listen to him, he's bluffing." I held up a laminated copy of my deed. I'd started keeping it in my truck after the first few HOA incidents. The guy at the front squinted at it, then muttered, "Yep, this is a county seal, we're out." One by one, the trucks started backing out. Karen's smile cracked. No, get back here. This is HOA authorized construction." "Not on my property, it isn't." The last truck rolled out, kicking up dust, leaving her standing there, fuming. She turned to me, finger jabbing in the air. "You think you're clever, Mason? You think this little power game will last? We'll get you in court." "Already been there," I said coolly. "Judge threw it out. Twice." Her lips twitched. "Fine. Then enjoy your lake. Alone." That night, I was sitting by the dock I'd built, lights reflecting on the calm water, when I noticed something. Flashlights. At least 3 of them. I stayed quiet, crouched near the boathouse, watching. It was Karen again, this time sneaking around with 2 men. They were carrying tools, bolts, rope, and what looked like a no trespassing HOA property sign. I shook my head. Unbelievable. I pulled up my phone, hit record, and stepped out of the shadows. "Evening, folks. Lovely night for vandalism, huh?" Karen froze mid-swing. "This isn't what it looks like." "Oh, really? Because it looks like you're planting an HOA sign on private land again." One of the guys muttered, "I told you this was a bad idea." I pointed toward the road. "You've got 30 seconds before I call the sheriff." She scoffed, but her voice was trembling. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, I would. Sheriff's on speed dial. He loves this kind of thing." She clenched her jaw, then turned and stormed off into the dark. I called out after her, "Oh, and Karen? Next time you want to step foot on my dock, you can, but you'll be paying the visitor fee like everyone else." She didn't reply, but I heard her mutter something about revenge.
2 days later, I got a letter, a thick, official-looking envelope. It was from the HOA's lawyer. I opened it, read the first paragraph, and burst out laughing. They were suing me for restricting community lake access and profiting from natural resources within HOA sightlines. That last part nearly made me choke on my coffee. Within sightlines? That's not even a legal term. But the best part? They attached photos of the lake with little circles drawn around view zones from HOA homes. Apparently, because they could see the lake from their windows, they thought that made it part of their community. I sent the whole file to my lawyer, Daniel, who's basically made a career out of beating HOAs. He called me back within the hour, laughing so hard he could barely speak. "Mason, this is gold. We're countersuing for harassment and false claims." "Think we'll win?" I asked. "Oh, we're not just going to win. We're going to make them pay your dock fees for the next 10 years. The court date came fast. The courtroom was packed. Local news had caught wind of it. Apparently, HOA claims ownership of lake because it can be seen from their yards was just too ridiculous to ignore. Karen sat across from me, arms crossed, lips tight. She looked like she'd spent days rehearsing her speech. The judge came in, a stern woman with gray hair and zero patience for nonsense. She said, "Let's make this quick. Mr. Mason, you own the lake." "Yes, Your Honor. Purchased legally, title and deed filed with the county." She nodded. "And the HOA claims jurisdiction?" Karen jumped up. "Yes, Your Honor, because the lake forms part of our community's natural vista. Our bylaws state—" The judge held up a hand. "Stop. Bylaws don't supersede property law." Karen blinked. "But our members—" "Your members," the judge interrupted, "don't own this land. Case dismissed." Karen's mouth fell open. But, furthermore," the judge continued, "Mr. Mason's countersuit for harassment is valid. HOA will pay damages and legal fees." The courtroom erupted. I swear even the bailiff cracked a smile. Karen just sat there, frozen, as her board members slowly turned to her with daggers in their eyes. When I walked past her on my way out, I leaned down just enough for her to hear me say, "Guess who's charging you dock fees now?" A week later, I put up a new sign at the entrance to my lake. Big, bold letters. "Dock use, $20 per person, HOA members welcome, cash only." It became a local joke. People drove from other neighborhoods just to see it. Some even paid for selfies with the sign. The HOA hated it, but they couldn't touch it. The court ruling made sure of that. And here's the kicker. Their own residents loved my lake. They started sneaking over on weekends, paying the fee just to relax by the water without HOA rules breathing down their necks. Eventually, the board couldn't stop them. It became the perfect irony, the HOA's own members funding the dock they tried to destroy. As for Karen, she resigned 3 weeks later. Word is she moved to another community. I just hope they did their research, because if there's one thing I learned, nothing drives a Karen crazier than a man who owns peace she can't control.
Summer rolled in like a golden wave across the hills, and my lake, once a quiet little corner of peace, had turned into something of a local landmark. Word had spread fast after the court ruling. The story of the guy who bought a lake the HOA couldn't touch went viral across town. People shared it on Facebook, Reddit. Even the local news did a segment titled "Man Beats HOA Turns Private Lake into Public Paradise." And I'll admit, I didn't mind the attention. Every weekend now, families showed up with fishing poles, kayaks, and coolers. They'd stop by my cabin to pay the dock fee, and I'd hand them a little wooden token with the words "Lake Mason Access" carved into it. I made them myself, mostly for fun, but soon people started collecting them like souvenirs. It wasn't just a lake anymore, it was freedom with a shoreline. Even some of the HOA residents, the very people who'd once cheered for Karen, started showing up.
They'd park quietly down the road, pretending not to be from the neighborhood, hand me $20 and whisper things like, "Please don't tell Karen I'm here." I always smiled and said, "Karen doesn't live here anymore." And that part was true. After the court loss and the humiliation that followed, Karen had resigned as HOA president. Then she put her house up for sale. The rumor was she'd tried to sue the board for lack of loyalty, but even her lawyer dropped the case halfway through. She disappeared for a while, until one afternoon she came back. It was late August, a warm evening, sun dipping low across the lake. I was sitting by the dock, grilling some burgers for a group of local fishermen, when I saw a familiar car pull up, a white Lexus. Karen stepped out, wearing oversized sunglasses and that same blazer she wore to every official HOA meeting, even though it was 85 degrees out. The whole dock went quiet. I crossed my arms and waited as she walked toward me, heels sinking into the gravel. "Well, if it isn't the queen of bylaws herself." She forced a smile. "I came to talk, Mason." "I didn't expect you to pay the dock fee," I nodded toward the collection box. She hesitated, then actually reached into her purse and pulled out a $20 bill. "Happy?" "Surprised, actually." I dropped the bill into the box. "All right, you're a guest now. What's on your mind?" She looked out over the lake, calm, shining, peaceful. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "I never really saw it like this before." "That's because you were too busy trying to control it." She winced, but didn't argue. "You know, it wasn't just about power. It was about order. I built that community from nothing. Then you showed up and suddenly people stopped listening. They started questioning things. Maybe they just wanted to breathe, without HOA permission slips." She sighed, took off her sunglasses, and for the first time she looked tired. Not angry, just human. "You humiliated me, Mason." "You did that yourself," I said gently. "But I'll be honest, I didn't mean to ruin your life. I just wanted to be left alone." She nodded slowly. "I guess we both learned something, huh?" "Yeah," I said, smiling. "You can't own nature." She smirked faintly, and "You can't out-stubborn me." "Want to bet?" I said, half joking. That actually made her laugh, a small, genuine laugh. Then she turned, looked back at the lake one last time and said, "Take care of it, Mason. Even people like me need to know it's still there." Then she got in her car and drove off. I watched her taillights fade down the dirt road until the dust settled. That was the last time I ever saw Karen.
Over the next few months, Lake Mason became a tradition. We started hosting dock nights every Friday. Families game with guitars, coolers, and lawn chairs. Someone would play country songs, kids would roast marshmallows, and I'd set up the grill. The air would fill with laughter and music, and every once in a while I'd glance at the hills across the water, the same hills where HOA signs used to hang. Now there were just silhouettes under the stars. Quiet. Peaceful. One evening, an old man from the HOA walked up to me. He looked nervous. "You the guy who owns the lake?" he asked. "Depends who's asking," I said. He chuckled. "Name's Richard. I was on the board, back when Karen was running things." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? You here to find me?" He laughed. "Oh, son, I came to apologize. We got carried away. She had us believing the HOA could fix everything. Guess we forgot how to just live." I handed him a cold soda. "Happens to the best of us." He sat down on the dock beside me. "You know what's funny? Ever since you started this lake thing, people in the neighborhood are happier, less complaints, more cookouts. It's like you broke the curse." "Guess I just gave folks something real," I said. He nodded. "Karen might have hated you, but you changed this town." That night, I sat by the water long after everyone had gone home. The moonlight rippled across the lake, and I could hear crickets in the trees. I thought about how it all started. Just me wanting peace and an HOA trying to take it. I never planned to become some kind of local legend, but maybe peace has a way of growing roots when you protect it hard enough.
As I sat there, my phone buzzed. It was an email from a company called Freedom Lakes Magazine. They wanted to feature my story in their next issue. Title suggestion: The Man Who Outsmarted the HOA and Built a Haven Instead. I couldn't help but laugh. I never asked for fame, I just bought a lake. But maybe that's how the best stories start. Not with plans, but with a line someone tries to cross. Weeks passed. Fall came, painting the trees gold and red. The lake grew quiet again, the way I liked it. But one chilly morning, I found something at the edge of my dock. A little wooden box with my name carved into it. No note, just a ribbon. I opened it, and inside was a small brass plaque. It read, "To Mason, for reminding us that freedom is worth protecting. The HOA Board." I stood there for a long time, staring at that plaque. Then I smiled, nailed it right to the side of the dock, and stepped back. For once, it wasn't about winning anymore. It was about balance. The HOA had finally learned to stay in their lane. And maybe, just maybe, I had learned that peace isn't just something you build for yourself. Sometimes it spreads. A year later, I got a letter from the new HOA president, a nice young guy named Tyler. He invited me to speak at their community meeting about property rights and coexistence. I almost said no. Old habits die hard. But then I thought of that brass plaque. So I showed up. When I walked in, people actually clapped. Not mockingly, not sarcastically, genuinely. I told them the whole story, from the first day I found Karen measuring my shoreline to the moment the judge threw her case out of court. And when I finished, Tyler stood up and said, "Mr. Mason, you taught us more about boundaries than any law book could." I nodded. Just remember, rules are supposed to protect people, not cage them. The whole room applauded, and for the first time I felt like the war was over. That night, back at the lake, I built one more sign. This one wasn't about rules or fees. It just said, "Welcome to Lake Mason. Everyone's invited, as long as you bring respect." And underneath it in smaller letters, "Dedicated to Karen for teaching me what not to do." Max, my dog, wagged his tail beside me as the last of the sunlight hit the water. I took a deep breath, smiled, and whispered, "We did it, buddy." The ripples on the lake shimmered like they were agreeing with me. And as the stars came out one by one, I realized something simple and powerful. The best revenge against control is living free enough not to need it. Like and subscribe for more wild HOA revenge stories, because sometimes peace isn't found, it's fought for.